And finally you have it. We're going to take this car for a drive. It was a few minutes ago that I stopped at the last episode. For you, if you're following my episodes, it'll be about 6 hours or however long it took you to watch my last episode. Let's get it out. We've all done our checks, so oil, water, everything's good. I've got spare oil, water in the back with spare tools. So and I've got a few little bits and pieces. I've got a hex for just to adjust the fuel mixture, because there could be some teething that I may have to do, but we're all nice and clean here. Let's get going. Let's get this party started. This is unexpected. Second time. Okay, that was a relatively smooth take up. A bit of hesitancy, but it is still on the choke. I expect that. Oh, this feels nice. Boingy and pointy. Oh, this feels fun. 30 seconds in and this is fun. I can feel everything. The steering feels nice and direct. Rack and pinion set up really nicely. Oh yes, it's nice to be back in a carburettor car, and I can feel the inefficiency and beefiness of that carburettor, the sound. This drive is very, very smooth straight away. The CVT box likes to hover around 2000 RPM. Currently we're doing 1600 at 20 miles an hour. Brakes need bedding in a lot. That was poor braking. Headlights on. Yeah, the brakes really do need to be bedded in. I've got to be very careful because these brakes are brand new at the front and they're very inefficient. My foot is going down a bit before anything happens, but it comes to a very nice stop. I've kept the choke on just for now because I think the mixture's a bit weak. That's a very smooth take up. I think I can feel it accelerating away from a stop and then it goes. I think the CVT has a slight inefficiency in the way it moves off. One thing we'll note is that there is very little to no creep function on this car. That's interesting. There's actually no creep. If I actually come to a complete stop and then take my foot off the gas, oh, it does creep a little bit. I don't want to be ridiculously hectic. We've got new tyres, we've got new brakes. I'm not going to be breaking the speed limit. I'm driving it like an old granny, but that's what you got to do. I've messed about with so much. I'll stop, open the bonnet, you get the picture. What a beautiful day in January to be driving this car. This thing feels like a gigantic, it sounds like a washing machine, this gearbox, spinning around on that belt. It literally sounds like my washing machine on a fast spin, a dry spin. And the gearbox goes nicely back. It's very, very, very enthusiastic in reverse. And that's a nice take up. The throttle kicker has been adjusted correctly because there's no bang when you go into gear. That's the idea, that it stops that from happening. Right. I've driven about 2 miles down the road. Now I've got to open the bonnet and just check and come back in. 2 seconds. Right, okay. All good? All good, sounds good. At that side the belt doesn't sound like it's loose. The water is, that's not dirty, that's just rusty. I think it's rusty water. It sounds a bit, you hear that? I think the mixture is slightly on the weak side, but we'll gloss over that. All good. This thing, I just had to make a slight correction there because the idle was dropping. In fact, the car sounded as if it was going to stall for a second when I switched the camera off, just to switch camera position. So I've richened the mixture and lowered the idle, because obviously when you richen it, the idle goes up, so you got to lower the idle speed down. Now I've managed to set it a little bit nicer. It feels happier. The choke is completely off and everything feels a bit more happier. That is a much smoother engine. It's not reverberating or going up and down in idle. It kind of feels like a heartbeat, but one that is very, very not rhythmic. And a regular heartbeat, if anybody has had a regular heartbeat, you'll know what that sounds like and feels. This gearbox is absolutely fantastic. It's just smooth as anything. The tyres feel nice as well, but as I say, the tyres won't bed in for another 50,000 miles, just like the brakes. The brakes are actually very, very poor at this moment in time, so I'm going to pass judgment on this. We are going into the sun. I do apologise, because naturally when I drive a car, it seems to be at the worst possible time of the day. But honestly, the driving position is so comfortable. The steering wheel is straight ahead of me. The pedals are where I expect them to be. Everything is ergonomically really good. I mean, why would you buy a Metro over one of these? A Metro with its unergonomical pedals and steering wheel position. I don't know why you would. I can now see why this car was such a hit back in the day. I mean, when this was launched in 1989, this must have been pretty, not radical, but pretty cut the mustard when it comes to this class of car, super minis, i.e. very cheap cars with low profit margins. And I tell you what, I can see, I can feel all the engineering that went, especially into that twist beam rear suspension, much better than the dead beam you get on a Mark 1, Mark 2. And I say better because I've never driven a Mark 1, Mark 2 yet. No doubt I'll find out how appalling they are to drive. I don't say they're appalling, but they're just not as good, are they? Kick down. Oh, that's nice acceleration. I'll be careful of the learners, because unfortunately my brakes are not that good at the moment, and if somebody goes out in front of me, that's me very, very upset for a long time. This pulls so nicely. Oh, utterly delightful. I've just pulled over for a second. The temperature has remained the same. I'm really pleased. The fuel gauge seems to have gone up a bit since driving. I didn't know that by driving the car the fuel level goes up. Naturally there is a joke to that, but I think the fuel sender is as inaccurate as a rover sender, and I almost got taken out by that idiot in a Golf. Drive. Don't let this Fiesta overtake us. The veteran goes first. Have respect. And Mark III's, to me, are considered veteran Fiestas because now they are quite an age. The youngest are 27 years old, which is quite an age now for this type of car. The suspension is quite soft but comfortable, soft and comfortable, but going around the corners, even at a measly 20 miles an hour, yeah, it's quite wallowy. I haven't got much support on these seats, so I'm having to hold on to the steering wheel to maintain my own body structure while going around the corner, otherwise my stomach might end up over here. $20 miles an hour speed limits mostly in Birmingham these days, and this car feels completely at home at this sort of speed, which is why it makes sense. Do you know what? Automatic classic cars are very rare, but when you get a good one that works, touch wood, it continues, it's an absolute joy driving a car this age, but stress-free, totally stress-free. First time I've properly, do you know what? I learnt to drive in a Fiesta very briefly for my first few driving lessons, and then my instructor decided to change cars to a Ford Focus. I think he might have been responsible for my addiction to Focuses, and that was a Focus Mark III. But apart from that, this is probably the longest drive I've had in a Fiesta for quite a long time, and I actually get what Fiestas are all about. One thing that makes me very aware of how old this car is that the windscreen wipers are very much not concealed. They are stuck in front of you on the windscreen to remind you that they are parked and not out of sight. CVH, I tell you what, my first impressions of this really good, it's a good engine. CVHs are good engines. Good engines, and they pull really nicely when they work and when they're tuned properly. I suspect most problems back in the day would have been caused by poor manufacture from the factory and poor tuning when in service, but there were a lot more problems with a CVH than that. But not changing the oil is definitely an owner fault, not the engine. But if you don't change the oil, the camshaft wears out and it just sounds awful. Remember the Ford Sierra from Rob's collection video? That's what they sound like when you don't change the oil and the cams are completely and utterly worn. And that engine had brand new hydraulic tappets. Didn't do a thing. Braking, braking, braking. God, this brake pedal is not brilliant. But then again, it is a solid disc. I've never driven a car with solid discs at the front. Actually, I have. My P6. What am I talking about? But this is, yeah, it's going to take some bedding in, but temperature's good. I can see this being quite an addictive car to drive. I am getting some funny looks off people. Like, what the heck is that doing there? Is it not rusted away by now? No, not this one. Far from it. It's almost a complete contrast to what you would have expected back in the day. I think most Mark III Fiestas that survive today are pretty much in that category of they look too nice. They're nowhere near as rusty as what you'd have had back in the day. This isn't normal, and I can completely agree, this is not a normal example. about and leans into the corner in that bend, but it doesn't feel out of control at all. It doesn't feel too wallowy. Naturally, these budget tyres, the only thing about budget tyres that there is a fault with budget tyres commonly, and that is the sidewall generally too soft. They're not as firm as what they need to be, and that will show itself when cornering. But overall, I don't feel as if I'm going to lose control at all. It feels very, very nicely planted, but I definitely feel the old architecture kind of seeping in a little bit. This is probably the most basic car in terms of suspension I've ever owned. I've only owned cars with independent rear suspension, but do you know what? You won't be able to tell during normal driving. The back end of the car is holding itself nicely. Don't think I can chance this. Kick down and overtaking manoeuvres are going to have to require some planning and go on, go. Yes. Just about. Thank God for that. Do have to look ahead with old cars. You really have to. Modern cars are too quick for me, and I think people in modern cars forget how slow cars back in the day used to be. We're talking about 75 horsepower in this thing, but that's more than most Fiestas. It is incredibly rare to get a Fiesta that isn't an XR2i with the CVH engine. Getting a 1.4 is very, very rare. In fact, I believe there's only 20 Mark III Fiestas with this type of engine, and I'm not kidding you, that is not a lie, that is from data. I'm going to pause, switch the engine off. Again. It's quite dirty in there, but it's just rust, it's just dirty water. Actually, the colour of the bottle makes the water look dirtier than what it is, but you can tell, can't you, that there's some mucky rubbish in the system. What I'm going to do at the end of this journey when I get home is take that blooming radiator hose, obviously let it cool, take the hose out and put more deionized water in and keep flushing it out until it gets a bit cleaner. I will put the blue stuff back in, but I've got a feeling the blue stuff has disturbed something in the cooling system that I couldn't get out by flushing the system when I originally bought the car. So it's a bit of a funny one, that, but yeah, we seem to be free of leaks here. All good. I'm really, really pleased with this. So I'm going to leave this here. This has been a successful run, and I'm going to leave that there. This car runs, it holds its temperature, and I'm chuffed to bits of it, ignore the police. So you take care, guys. I think I've been done for speeding, joking. You take care, I will see you, and Ruby will see you in another episode where I possibly concentrate on beautification work. The rails need to be painted, and obviously my task now is arch. I'm not going to focus on that because at the moment it will live as it is under the cover. But look at the back bumper. It's not been that good since I actually bought it. That scrubbing down really worked, and I haven't put bumper treatment on it, bumper gel. Absolutely not. I'm really chuffed with this car. She has ran like a dream. For the first time since all that tuning, some fine fettling, and I'm no doubt going to fettle it again, but it seems much happier now I've turned that screw a little bit on the fuel mixture setting. So I'm going to leave you here. Obviously that's another thing that I'm going to come to. Whether or not I get that professionally painted and the boot, I don't know, but I am 100% definitely going to have a go at those arches. For the argument's sake, and I will explain myself now, I'm not trying to cover anything up whatsoever. I'm not bodging. You know what I'm going to do. If there's no holes and there's a bit of loss of metal, I will put filler just to skim that arch and make it nice and smooth, ready for paint. I'm going to get some cans matched to that paintwork and that paintwork for good paintwork correction, and then I'm going to go there. And that's as far as I'm concerned. You take care. I will see you very soon. I bet you're wondering what I'm doing at the end of this video after I said goodbye, but it's not goodbye from usually fixing and tinkering, as is the way with old cars. When you take it on a journey for the first time, you will uncover some undiscovered problems. Now we've discovered a problem, because I'll just start the car up. It's got the choke on. If I put the choke in, gone. It will not idle at all. The only way I can keep this car from actually not stalling is by having the choke on or the throttle on. At the end of that video, I drove to my mate's to show him the car, because he had one back in the day. He loved it, and the car behaved very well indeed. Then it got a bit wrong on the way home, and I started getting a bit of shuddering, and then the gearbox started getting a bit funny, because the engine was getting a bit funny. The gearbox is only as smooth as the engine is, and there was a bit of misfiring and issues here and there. You may have noticed actually as well that the blue smoke is still apparent on acceleration, just slightly. I believe we've got piston rings, you know, that sort of thing, but I'm hoping that will calm down with the additive. I didn't put the full whack of additive in, that Lucas oil stabilizer, so I may do this again, and that oil in there, that 1040, I might swap it for 1540, but for now this is going to be treated as running in oil. As I say, there are going to be teething problems. I am due to take the car for the MOT in a few days time, but that's not going to happen, because this is not going to pass an MOT with it being like this. It might do, strange enough, because the limits are 3.5% CO2, which is quite high, I can tell you. So it will probably pass, but I don't want it to go in like that. So I did discover what the issue is, and it's a very simple test, and it's something that I've pointed out to you guys before. All that black stuff around the exhaust manifold gasket, you know what that is? Yeah, I knew what it was. Carbon. Shouldn't be there, because if you look at this video, I discovered exactly the problem with good old-fashioned brake cleaner. Problem found, Rob. It will not cope. Brake cleaner. Observe. Oh yes, exhaust manifold gasket, there you go. Yep, that is entirely correct. That exhaust manifold gasket is absolutely shot. So it's going to have to come off. I might have to order some new bolts and studs, because exhaust manifold gaskets, you know, exhaust manifolds get stuck. I'm going to have to give the block a good clean and move it all off again. So we're going to get messy under the engine bay again, but it's a little teething problem. I think the inlet gasket is fine, but the exhaust manifold gasket is not in a particularly good condition. So it needs to be changed, and I'll get it sorted. So that might explain why, Rob, this is why Ruby would not idle for you. And this, guys, explains why Rob set the car up with the idle really high and the choke really high, because just couldn't cope at idle. And I've noticed this a couple of times, but on the driveway, this is my point. On the driveway, under very controlled conditions and very narrow conditions, that problem didn't exist. But you drive it out there in the real world, where you get hot, and then you got the, you know, the RPMs are going up and down, and you got acceleration and deceleration. Real world stressful driving for that engine. It couldn't cope. So we know what the problem is, and it means that essentially I've enriched the plugs. So it just goes to show that the reason this car runs a bit rich is because of that reason. More air, need more fuel, so therefore I have to make it richer. The problem is, because there's a leak in the gasket, that means air can come in at any moment and disrupt that flow. It doesn't matter how rich I make this car, it's never going to be quite the same. I had to have the choke halfway to make sure it didn't stall at junctions when slowing down. But apart from that, today's been a really good day. A puff of Ford CVH blue smoke, it's nothing really, is it? And everything else works a treat. The water's got dirty again, so that's going to have to come out again. Oh, it's more content. But this is the world of classic cars. You have several plus points, but one negative. There's always one negative. Anyway, You take care, guys. I shall see you, and Ruby will, very soon, with a new gasket.